Good evening. I'm Karen Taylor. I am Programme Director of the General Society of Mechanics and Tradesmen of the City of New York, and I'm so pleased to welcome you all here this evening, both our in-person audience and our online audience. Of course, we're here for a very special talk, Edinburgh World Heritage, Preserving Heritage and Connecting Cultures, with Christina Sinclair, Director of Edinburgh World Heritage. I have to, on a personal note, I had the good fortune to spend a few days in Edinburgh this past summer during the festival and was reminded of what an absolutely magnificent city it is. I want to acknowledge our partners in tonight's presentation, the American Scottish Foundation, who arranged tonight's event. I also want to acknowledge our other partner, the Royal Oak Foundation, for their help in promoting this event, and to welcome all their members and of both the American Scottish Foundation and the Royal Oak, but of course also a warm, very warm welcome to our members and to our audience. For those of you who may be less familiar with the General Society, a brief introduction. The General Society of Mechanics and Tradesmen was founded in 1785 by 22 skilled artisans. Today, our 239-year-old organization continues to serve and improve the quality of life for the people of the City of New York through our educational and cultural programs. These include our General Society Library, of course, of which our in-person audience is sitting in tonight, our John M. Mossman Locke Museum, which you are welcome to visit at the conclusion of the talk, our tuition-free Mechanics Institute, and finally, our General Society Lecture Series, a lecture series that was started in 1838. To introduce our speaker this evening and to say a few words about the Scottish American Foundation, I'm going to introduce Camilla G. Hellman, MBA, President of the American Scottish Foundation. But before I do that, one of our other partners is here, and this is Alison Dichter of the Royal Oak Foundation, and she's just going to say a few quick words about the Royal Oak Foundation, and then it will be over to Camilla.
Sorry, I'm short, so sorry about that. I'm with the Royal Oak Foundation. We're actually located on the 6th floor. We are the American affiliate of the National Trust of the UK, Wales, and Northern Ireland. So not Scotland, but of course we love our Scottish friends. We also have a wonderful lecture series that we just are starting again on Monday. So I'm here to attend this wonderful lecture, but should you have any questions about the organization and our programs, I will be here after and happy to talk about the Royal Oak Foundation. And give you a little bit more about our lectures. So thank you, and thank you for inviting me to this wonderful event.
Good evening, I'm Camilla Hellman, President of the American Scottish Foundation, and I'm so delighted that we're once again partnering with the General Society of Mechanics and Tradesmen. This is our second talk with them as part of now what we're going to be developing is a Scottish American artisan series tagged on to their artisan talks. So this is the first in several that we will be doing, and we hope that you will be enjoying them. The American Scottish Foundation was started in 1956 as a bridge between Scotland and the United States, there to help preserve and amplify the messages of heritage arts and culture. And what could be more correct than us being involved with the wonderful Edinburgh World Heritage, who are a UNESCO guard of the heritage of Edinburgh and preserver of it. Christina her life is dedicated to the preservation of heritage and culture and architecture. She is a graduate of the University of Edinburgh and has been involved in so many public works that there is a long biography that we could be talking about. But I really feel that the best thing to do is to hand over to Christina and let her begin to take us on this wonderful visit to Edinburgh and all that you are doing to preserve the wonderful culture and preservation of buildings there. Thank you, Christina, for joining us.
Right, hello everyone, and thank you so much to our wonderful hosts tonight and our wonderful partners, and to all of you for joining us. As per the lovely introduction, I am Christina Sinclair, and I am the Director of Edinburgh World Heritage. And for those of you who understandably might be a little bit less familiar with us, we are the independent non-profit dedicated to the proactive conservation of Scotland's absolutely stunning capital city. Now, it might be a bit of nice context for you all tonight that I don't normally do this. We don't normally go to other countries, talk about our work, and engage people in their shared heritage. We do this only in North America and only starting recently, and it's part of a new program to deepen the ties with North America through engaging people meaningfully in our shared heritage as Scots and Scottish Americans and working together to protect it. So with that in mind, I'm especially delighted to be here to honour and to enrich the deep-rooted Scottish American connection by delving with you into the fascinating world of conserving the Edinburgh World Heritage site. What I'll do for you tonight, and what I thought you would enjoy, is to do a couple of things. First of all, to talk about World Heritage Site and why it matters. Secondly, to invite you into my team's secret world, the story of Edinburgh's conservation over the years, and a little bit about our work within that context. I'll also just scratch the surface of the historic and deep-rooted Scottish American connection from the Edinburgh perspective. And I will, of course, hope to deepen that connection with you tonight, sharing with you openly what needs to happen next to conserve Scotland's capital, and how you can, if you wish to, be a part of it. So, I think it's really important to start with why anyone should actually care. Obviously, I care, I'm very biased, and I suspect that many of you do as well, but it's nonetheless a really important place to start. And in trying to think about how to approach this, I thought it would be great to actually start with what Edinburgh isn't. It isn't the wonderful London. It isn't the aspiring Manchester in England. And it isn't Leeds. It's Edinburgh. It's Edinburgh. It is authentic, historic, unique, and a vital connection to our shared past. There is a reason that Edinburgh looks so different to those other cities. It did not just happen. It is a serious task of work, and it was never a given. Today, I think it's fair to say that Edinburgh is, very simply, a beautiful city. The heart of our culture as Scots, at the heart of our culture as Scots around the world, and an irreplaceable connection to our shared past. It is a remarkably complete living tapestry of our history. So let's talk a little bit about the World Heritage Site designation. It was inscribed by UNESCO in 1995. And it's worth thinking about what exactly that means. And if you look at UNESCO's website and you draw together what they're really saying, what World Heritage Site status means is that a place is of such outstanding value that it transcends not only international boundaries, but intergenerational boundaries, to be of common importance to humanity as a whole. Now, I am extremely biased, but I think that's just about one of my favorite definitions of anything. And whenever a site is designated as a World Heritage Site, it is given a statement of outstanding universal value. And that's just really fancy talk for why a place is so special. And the key reason in Edinburgh is the survival and the quality of two contrasting styles of urban development. The organic layers of the medieval onwards Old Town, in contrast to the spacious, ordered elegance of the New Town, which had a major influence on European urban planning from the 18th century onwards. It is the condition, it is the quality, it is the survival, and it is the completeness of these two very distinct forms of urban architecture and planning that make Edinburgh so special. But it's very important to note that it's not just about the buildings. In Edinburgh, we say that the spaces are just as important, and I really stand by that, because it is the urban layout, it is the parks and gardens, the graveyards, the monuments, and the natural landscape features that make Edinburgh what it is. Now, just to give you a sense of what I mean when I say we are the proactive non-profit for Edinburgh's conservation, I'm just going to give you a quick summary of what it is we actually do, because I've said before that that conservation work doesn't take care of itself. We, I like to think, play a vital role in conservation in Edinburgh. For a lot of people, undertaking expensive conservation work is both probably one of the biggest financial commitments that they will ever make, and it is also something that is incredibly intimidating. How do I do this right for my Georgian tenement? How do I do this right for my beautiful industrial or institutional building? So therefore, we overcome those barriers for people. We provide the powerful grants and free expert advice to unlock vital conservation projects. We have been doing so for over 50 years and over 1,500 projects, and we have around 15 on the go in Edinburgh right now. In addition to the on-site conservation work, we have our engagement programme, of which this, of course, is a really wonderful part. We want to engage to ensure that heritage is for all. And that includes everything from engaging underrepresented communities in expressing their heritage. It involves our educational programme with schools. It involves our series of events, which we hold online as well as in person, and it involves major gala dinners. It really is the full gambit. We also ensure that heritage is a key part of the solution to the climate emergency. This is incredibly important at present because the historic environment is at risk from climate change, not just from environmental impact, but from genuinely well-intentioned, but harmful human intervention to try and adapt them. So we provide grants, and again, we provide advice to help that along. And one that often gets a little bit sort of swept under the carpet, but I think is really important to bring out and talk about, is we are the city's independent expert advisors, ensuring conservation is high on the decision makers' radar in a complex and capital city. Now, I'd like you to envisage how many people do all of this. This is us. I have the absolute pleasure to work with an extraordinarily expert, passionate, and really paying it forward team of architects, town planners, climate emergency specialists, and education and engagement specialists. So we like to think of ourselves as genuinely impactful, if not rather small and mighty. So enough about us. I actually want to invite you into our world, into that team's world, the team of the conservationists, and to tell you the story of how Edinburgh's stunning historic buildings and spaces were saved. This is not hyperbole. And it is a story that few know, and maybe a few of our partners and friends in the room have actually heard a little bit about this, but very, very few people know about this, and it is important to talk about. Because the truth is that there are so many points in Edinburgh's history where irreplaceable heritage and beauty absolutely might have been lost. And it was really only through people who care, everyday people, professionals, public, community partnerships, really people rolling up their sleeves, that genuinely wonderful things have been achieved in Edinburgh. I kind of can't overstate enough how important it is that we as people who are connected with Scotland know this, and some good people take on the baton from that past generation. Now, I don't have time to talk about Edinburgh's full history to here tonight, as much as I would love to do that, but let me just dial the clock back 50 years. 20th century decline in Edinburgh came to a head around about the late 1960s and early 70s. And at this time, a huge amount of Edinburgh might have been lost. Robert Matthew, at that point in history, and a famous architect at the time, stated that Edinburgh was, and I quote, almost past the point of repair. You had incredible amounts of stonework and high-level masonry and historic detailing lost, and to the extent where huge parts of Edinburgh's New Town in particular were actually earmarked as demolition for slum housing. There was even a proposal to put a highway right through the first New Town of Edinburgh, right through the heart of the Royal Mile. So things were undoubtedly looking grim for Edinburgh's World Heritage site back then. So how was this turned around? Well, looking back through our records, we found it actually started with everyday people raising the alarm, rolling up their sleeves, putting their various connections and skills to action, and they were very quickly joined by architects and strong productive voices. Robert Matthew, the architect, comes up again. He noted that what they were trying to do by saving Edinburgh was the greatest task of urban conservation in Great Britain. These professionals came together, and in 1969, a survey was completed by over 120 architects, surveyors, engineers, to not only gather the scale of works that needed to happen to save the city, but also how much it would cost to save it. And just for the New Town, very roughly half of the now World Heritage site, that figure came to over £230 million by today's standards. This inspired others to get involved. The Bank of Scotland, industrial and charitable sources supported the formation of the Scottish Civic Trust, a body to safeguard national heritage in Scotland for the whole country. Then a conference was held, and Patrick Nutkins was cited as saying at the conference to save Edinburgh's New Town, the scale of proposed operation in Edinburgh makes the work of York or Bath or Chichester or Chester relatively small and trivial by comparison. And it was from this conference, the leaflet of which you can see on the right there, was formed the Edinburgh New Town Conservation Committee, Edinburgh World Heritage's parent organisation. So it was essentially our beginning. And it was headed by my professional ancestor, the wonderful Irish architect, Desmond Hodges, who you can see on the left there. He had amazing support from everyday people who cared, to institutions, to government, and he was able to do wonderful things. It is fair to say that this absolutely marked a turning point in the fate of Edinburgh. But how exactly did he and his team make this change? Well, let me talk you through just a few key things that were established in the coming decades that really turned things around for Edinburgh. For one thing, a model for impact was established. This is very much akin to the grants and advice that I mentioned that we still do today. This was our first project. It's 23 and 24 Fettes Row, and it was then located on the tattered fringe of Edinburgh's New Town. Grants and support were provided in order to help restore this building, which was in such poor condition that one entire elevation was delaminating, and that's essentially where an entire part of the facade is peeling away from the building. The project was so successful, and you can see the before and after images here, that it was celebrated by a visit by the Queen Mother on its opening. Another key thing that was changed over these decades was the provision of a body that provided independent expert advice. This is just one example, but it is a rather wonderful one. It is the Care and Conservation of Georgian Houses, a repair and maintenance manual for the Edinburgh New Town, which was published in 4 editions up to 1995. This actually empowered and enabled owners to figure out what exactly they should be doing and gave them confidence in how to undertake conservation work. And this has been replicated through the huge amounts of advice that we still produce today, from how to adapt your historic building to deal with the changing climate, to how to look after your roof and various other things, as well as our advice to the City Council and others on how to protect the site. So the importance of independent expertise was something that was really established and made important in this period. Another was the power of partnership. This is a stretch of Canongate tenements. Today their number is 181 to 193, and there are approximately 16 dwellings and 5 shops. Now, this image is taken from, we believe, the early 20th century, and shows these buildings as they were, in a genuinely poor state of repair. It was actually part of the city's Tolbooth area restoration project, spearheaded by the excellent city architect Robert Hurd. And this got things to a certain point, but they struggled to go from there on, at which point ourselves at Edinburgh World Heritage picked up the baton and continued this stretch of tenements along the Royal Mile. This is the result today. And this, by the way, is the curse of the conservation professional. When we've done a great job, it looks like nothing happened. It's only when you see the before image that you start to appreciate the scale of work. Another key thing that was established over these decades and is continued today is the importance of overcoming local barriers. This is the beautiful Well Court, which was completed to the designs of Sidney Mitchell in 1886. And it's really rather beautiful workers' housing, or was initially designed as. When you get into the 21st century, however, this building was in quite a poor state of repair, not because the various residential owners, now in private ownership, didn't care about it, but because the 55 of them found it very difficult to work together, something that is not helped by Scots law around ownership. So as you can see the pattern, therefore Edinburgh World Heritage got involved to help. We provided not only the grants, but crucially our expertise in getting people to work together and gain consensus and hand-hold people through lengthy projects to get this one off the ground. And the result is, as you can see in this image, with high quality restoration works, including the restoration of the clock tower and key decorative elements. People often think that conservation is a static process. I would say it's exactly the opposite. Because every historic site is so wonderful and so unique, there is no 2 projects the same. And not only that, but we're always responding to new challenges. This is the rather wonderful Canongate housing development, completed in 1969 by Sir Basil Spence. Now, it might not be the most historic building in Edinburgh, but it's also one of the most protected because it is so significant as part of our 20th century heritage. It's highly designated, it's in a conservation area, it's on the Royal Mile, it's in the middle of the World Heritage site. And you might think, therefore, can't do anything with that, couldn't possibly touch it. Well, in response to the climate emergency, we project managed, funded, or part funded along with our partners, and really kind of pushed forward this project, which is conservation and sustainability hand in hand, undertaking key conservation works alongside considered climate emergency retrofit in order to show what could be done with even the most protected buildings. This is on track to save 28 tons of carbon emissions a year, very roughly the equivalent to planting around 3,000 trees. And lastly, there is our ability to unlock potential. These images are all taken from our 12 Monuments project. The monuments are an incredibly important part of Edinburgh. However, in financial and conservation terms, they're a headache, quite frankly, because the council who owns them doesn't have a lot of money to look after them. And they are, in effect, buildings without a use that don't generate any sort of finance to look after them. So therefore, we instigated an ambitious programme with the City of Edinburgh Council to restore Edinburgh's 12 most important monuments. And crucially, we managed to raise a third from trusts, businesses, institutions, and the public to unlock this project, as well as provide apprenticeships for young people who had fallen on difficult employment times. There are so many projects that I would like to tell you about that I don't have time to talk about today in any detail. For example, the image on the left is of our wonderful 12 Closes project, which takes some of the most important, intimate, and socially significant spaces within Edinburgh and uplifts their conservation alongside community co-design and interpretation to bring them up to the standard that you can see on that image on the left-hand side in Stephen Law's Close. You can see our work as you walk up and down the Royal Mile in these closes on your next visit. There's also major sort of iconic projects that I don't quite have time to talk about, such as our help on the City Observatory, which you can see when it was on site in the bottom image, our work with Intercultural Youth Scotland, and our work on graveyards. But suffice to say that through the model that was set down by Desmond Hodges, we've been able to build on that over the years to have real impact. And we are very much an impact-orientated team. This, my apologies, slightly braggy slide, is just really to show you what we have achieved over those 50-odd years. And I guess what I want to get across to you tonight is that all of this shows that conservation work, as esteemed partners in the room know, it doesn't just happen. And I think wonderful things have been achieved in Edinburgh that we as a collective Scots community can be extremely proud of. And I think this is one of the key thoughts that I would like to leave you with tonight. The fact that Edinburgh was saved by amazing people across the power. Speaking of amazing people, I want to speak, I know that I'm speaking to a room of people who care. And I've mentioned more than once tonight the deep historic bond between Scotland and America. Now, I think I'd be preaching to the choir if I talked about all the amazing connections and people between our two countries, from Carnegie, who had amazing input on this building, to Alexander Graham Bell and others. But forgive me, I must have few honourable mentions. 35 men who have served as the US president have either been of Scottish or Ulster Scots descent. This includes George Washington, Theodore Roosevelt, Woodrow Wilson, Gerald Ford, Ronald Reagan, and Bill Clinton. Alexander Hamilton, born of the Ayrshireman James Hamilton, as you will know, probably established the first Bank of the United States and helped write the American Constitution. Perhaps a personal favourite of mine, the absolutely iconic John Muir, grew up a stone's throw from Edinburgh and never lost his Scots accent because he moved over at the age of 11 to the US, eventually becoming the father of the national parks here, an inspiration in natural conservation. This slightly more obscure reference is said to be, I'm caveating here because there's a lot more research to be done, the earliest known representation of the Stars and Stripes. It is actually carved into a door in Edinburgh Castle. And it was thought to be put there by an American sailor captured during the War of Independence. This statue of Abraham Lincoln can be found in our beloved Old Calton Burial Ground in Edinburgh. And it was completed in 1893 to the designs of amazing New York sculptor George Bissell. And it was in the memory of Scottish American soldiers. It was said to be the first statue of Lincoln completed outside of the USA. And today, through the excellent work of the White House Historical Association, we actually gather here to annually celebrate President's Day. To me, this speaks of not only the historic, but the current day connection between our countries. And finally, but by no means least, the excellent Frederick Douglass, American social reformer, abolitionist, orator, writer, and leader of the African-American civil rights movement in the 19th century. During his time in Scotland, he was appointed Scotland's anti-slavery agent and considered Edinburgh to be elegant, grand, and very welcoming. Something that makes me personally very happy. He actually felt such a strong connection with Scotland that he chose his name from the famous Scottish poem Lady on the Lake by Sir Walter Scott, and could often be found giving talks passionately in Rose Street Chapel in Edinburgh. The list could go on, but I only have so much time with you here tonight. Perhaps my point is that that connection between Scotland and America, from my point of view, is absolutely thriving today. By recent estimations, there are 25 million American Scots, and the existence of wonderful organisations like the American Scottish Foundation just shows how passionate people are. We recently had a survey done by Visit Scotland, and we found that over 20% of people who visit Scotland from abroad are from the US. They are coming home. My point really being here that there's so much connecting us. And I always like to think of Edinburgh as our shared gift from the past. This is your heritage too. You deserve to know what's going on with it, and if you wish to, have the chance to get involved. That is why we at Edinburgh World Heritage have launched our North American programme, to deepen the ties through engaging people meaningfully in our shared heritage and working together to protect it. And as someone who views the world through the very long lens of history, I don't think in years, I think in centuries. So I know that we are living in history now, and what we decide to do next will be noted. So for me, this is professional as well as it is personal. And I have two legacies that I would love to leave in my tenure as Director of Edinburgh World Heritage. One, very sincerely, is this programme to deepen the wonderful American-Scottish connection. And the second is to address the three big challenges facing conservation in Edinburgh within our generation. Because the truth is that Edinburgh's conservation is at really quite a fragile point in its long history. So let me share my big three with you and what I think from a professional point of view needs to be done. One key trend that we are noticing in our day-to-day work is that there is an accelerated deterioration of Edinburgh's historic fabric. I'll talk about that in a moment, but the very clear conclusion is that we in Edinburgh World Heritage need to do more conservation projects at a greater rate than ever before to counteract this. So why is this happening? Well, like any historic city, we have a maintenance backlog. This is nothing particularly shocking, but it is quite prevalent in Scotland. To look at the Scottish statistics, the Housing Conditions Survey for Scotland in 2019 found that 71% of pre-1919 buildings were in critical need of repair. That is nothing new, but the climate emergency is. We are seeing and will continue to see greater instances of high-intensity rainfall events and high-intensity wind events in Edinburgh, and we are seeing them already. This is having a significant impact on the rate of decay of historic stonework and other features. This is borne not just by our judgment, but by the data. In Edinburgh, we keep tabs on the instances of stonefall, so that's instances where high-level stonework has fallen off onto the ground, because it's quite a good indicator of the health of our historic building stock. And famously and very sadly, a young woman was killed some years ago by this very issue. So these are instances of stonefall in Edinburgh, each dot representing one instance. And I'd like you to, just in your mind for a moment, imagine what period of time this happened over. How many months, years, whatever you think. Just have a figure in your head. This happened between January and May of 2021, so just a few months. If you would like some really scary images, look at the instances between 2015 and 2020. There is clear evidence that the climate emergency is accelerating decay and is something that we absolutely at Edinburgh World Heritage must up our game and keep on top of. The next significant challenge facing the conservation of Edinburgh is that there is unprecedented financial strain on owners. And this means that our grants and our financial aid is needed more than ever. Conservation works are expensive. I gather they are as expensive here as they are in Scotland. And crucially, we don't own buildings ourselves, but we help everyday people conserve their buildings and spaces. And the cost of living crisis in Scotland means that people are financially simply less able to undertake these expensive conservation works. So more people need our grant support, and not only that, they need more support for each project, because they are hit with a 1-2 punch. Not only do they have less disposable income, but the cost of conservation work is increasing very considerably. The Building Cost Information Service, a leading independent in the UK, found that construction costs continue to grow at an unprecedented annual growth rate of 13.8%, and that was found in May of 2022. This image just is one example and shows a few of the construction cost price changes from 2021 to 2022. So it is clear that people need more financial support from Edinburgh World Heritage and need more when they apply. And thirdly, and really importantly, there is real pressure for change in Edinburgh right now. There always has been because it's a capital city, but even more so. So our role as the city's independent expert advisor has never been more important, and people who care really need to be heard. Just to give you some examples of what I mean by that, there are major public realm schemes in Edinburgh. The image on the top right is the proposed revitalisation of George Square, which is a main street within the World Heritage site. That is a much improved scheme from the point where before we became involved and started influencing the scheme, because the council were understandably looking to save money, and we were able to help advise them on a different route to really make the most of this important historic space within the city. Pressure from developers is very significant in Edinburgh. If you think back to the images at the beginning of the talk, you could see that we have resisted high rises in the city. We've maintained the authenticity of Edinburgh. But because the land values are so high, they are always knocking at that door. And we were able some years ago to stop a really harmful scheme to the wonderful Royal High School, which is the image on the mid-right, from being turned into a very intensive hotel development. But we're not anti-development. The image on the bottom right is actually one we're really happy with, where we worked closely with the architect to ensure that new development actually put a layer of contextual modern architecture into the city. And there's about 1 million more ways in which we advise. We advise on the economy, on the management of graveyards that you can see on the top left, and how to get the best balance for both visitors and local people. So it's very clear that our advice is needed more than ever before. Now at this point, I'm very conscious that I'm coming across as the very dour Aberdonian with all of the bad news. So let me tell you the good news, because there is plenty of it. The good news is that Edinburgh World Heritage is actually poised to provide more grants and free advice than ever before. We are raring to go to address these issues. To help do the most with relatively little funding for some areas, we have revitalized our very efficient stitch and time maintenance program, because maintaining a building is so much cheaper than repairing it. We are producing new guidance to help people do this and empower them to save money in the long run whilst looking after their heritage. We are ensuring that heritage is a key part of the solution to the climate emergency. We're influencing not only national legislation in Scotland, but also local climate ready plans, and trying to work together to ensure that across the sectors we are responding in a way that is being very specific to Edinburgh's specific architecture. We are very much working hard to ensure that heritage is conserved for all and by all. We are a little bit late, I would say, in Scotland in coming to terms with our colonial past, and is something that we are actively reckoning with now, with a conserve and challenge approach, essentially not getting rid of anything important, but acknowledging its role, researching that role and interpreting that role, so that we can have conversations about what kind of future we want to have in Scotland for everyone. I think this one's important. As a non-profit, I think the trick is always to do more with less. One thing that we're particularly proud of is our neighbourhood focus programme, which actually identified the areas of greatest need within the city and then targeted our grants, our advice, our engagement, our climate emergency solutions, all of it, to ensure that we had real impact and area uplift with less resources. We are advocating for new funding systems. New forms of levies in Scotland are being explored, and that's something that we're working very closely with Scottish Government on. And wonderfully, we are growing our community of people who care. If we do all of this, and as I say, we are very much poised to do so, this will work. Edinburgh will absolutely be conserved for us to pass on the baton to the next generation. So although there are some key challenges facing the city, I would say, as an eternal optimist, rather than a dour Aberdonian, that things are looking good. So as I start to wind up here, I'd just like to give you a sense of how you can be a part of Edinburgh's story if that's something that you're interested in. Because Edinburgh is a truly special place for our shared culture. Its active conservation has been the work of some incredible people over the years, from individuals to communities, businesses and experts, and it's going to need all of those people to help it in the next phase of its long history. We at Edinburgh World Heritage are very proud of our impact, and we are raring to go to meet the challenges that I've described. You, if you're interested, might be the key that unlocks that. You can help me deepen the fantastic connection between our two countries. Now, as I alluded to at the beginning, we are just at the start of building our community of people who love Edinburgh across North America. We are starting with you. And this is your chance to get it in the ground level and really press your thumbprint, not only into the programme itself, but into the history of Edinburgh. My dream, without it sounding too corny, is that anyone who cares about Edinburgh can play a meaningful role in its long history. So forgive me for just giving you a sense of how you might be able to do just that. For one thing, you can just get more information. There is a sheet at the desk where you walked in. You can just put your name on that or scan the QR code just to get more information about what I've talked about. You can join our close-knit community, become an international friend that gives you preferential access to things like our events and so much more. You can have your business become a business partner. We have everything from major international businesses to local corner shops. We have options for everyone. Just to take a look at the Support Us part of our website. You can, of course, make a tax-deductible donation to match your means. I would say that small is mighty and huge is game-changing. So there are so many options. And for anyone who wants to discuss that with me, of course, I'll be here at the reception. And I've also left a few days here in New York. So if anyone wants to have a follow-up chat, that's wonderful. please take one of my cards or just chat with me and we can set something up. Or of course, you can just simply be an ambassador. Connect us to those who might like to support. Thank you for bearing with me on that one. I hope I have meaningfully connected you to Edinburgh's proactive conservation story and inspired you to get involved in whatever way might feel right to you. I enormously look forward to strengthening and deepening the cultural connections between America and Scotland. A huge thank you to the very wonderful General Society of Mechanics and Tradesmen of the City of New York, apologies, and to the wonderful American Scottish Foundation, and to you all. Thank you so much.
Christina, what a fabulous talk. Your eloquence was magnificent, like the city of Edinburgh, and you are really a terrific ambassador for Edinburgh. Now, I'm sure we're going to have quite a few questions, and in fact, I already had a couple online, if you would bear with me till I... This is Maya. She's on, and she's asking about the political dynamics of Scotland. Particularly, she's referring to the Scottish independence advocates and the recent change of government. Without putting you on the spot, and if you would rather plead the Fifth Amendment, that would be fine with us.
Goodness, what a question to start on. Thank you. Not taking it light on me. I like it. I think part of, I don't want to cop out, but I do want to give you the honest answer, which is that we see ourselves as the independent expert advisor. And for that reason, I think it's very important that we're actually apolitical. And we work really hard to work across the parties and not to bring any kind of personal feelings on politics into it. So, I'm afraid it's probably not that satisfying an answer for our lovely question, but, I think whatever happens with independence and other issues, our focus is on, great, how do we best conserve Edinburgh's historic environment as part of that?
I think that was a terrific apolitical answer, so thank you very much. Okay, we have a few questions in the audience.
Either independently of or in concert with your organization, could you comment on the pace of and quality of for-profit restoration in Edinburgh?
Excellent question. I would say it's mixed, because on one hand, the projects that we help with, of course, they have to be of a high conservation standard. So that's a good way of making sure that repairs and restoration are done right in the city. However, of course, people do without our support all the time. Perhaps a really interesting intersection there is in new development, because I mentioned that the property values are so high in Edinburgh, and quite understandably, developers want to make the most that they can out of a development. I would say that we do have to put significant resource into, if I can put it bluntly, stopping the bad guys. This is something that's really important in the city, and we do so on a regular basis. I'm on the Edinburgh Urban Design Panel that helps to decide these major applications, and we do have to put resource into stopping, quote unquote, the bad stuff. Quite a lot of the time, however, I would say that there is a willingness there to do the right thing by Edinburgh, and a lot of developers will work with us and will give what we call pre-application advice or early development advice to them. And there's some developers that do absolutely excellent work in the city and are a real delight to work with. So yeah, it varies considerably, but that economic pressure is very much there, so we're having to spend quite a bit of time to make sure that things are done right for the city. I hope that helps. Thank you.
Christina, with respect to, two questions, the stones falling off. I know in New York City we have a local law inspection, and that was first sparked by an incident at, I think it was in Columbia University, and it killed a student, God rest her soul. So do you have any proactive programs like that, number one? Number two, with respect to the cutting of the carbon emissions in that particular building, what exactly did they do? I'm curious.
Yeah,
Thank
great
you.
questions. So on the Stonefall question, when I did our first visit to the US last year, I was hearing about the inspection processes in New York and actually brought it back to the City of Edinburgh Council and said, hey guys, this is a great idea. So, I don't think we do it quite as well, perhaps as here. What we do is we monitor that data, and then we as an independent nonprofit try to really funnel our grants towards those areas and funnel our advice to help people maintain those buildings. But that is the extent of the formal processes around that, and I think we could do a lot better and need to do a lot better as a city. On the question of the climate emergency adaptation, great question. So a lot of the energy efficiency measures were also conservation measures. So, for example, the windows within that wonderful 20th century architecture, they had been, I think the technical term is a hodgepodge. Does that translate? They were really messed around over the years. So what we were able to do was find the original design by Sir Basil Spence, and then have those windows made in triple glazing and restored. So that was a net conservation gain, as well as an energy efficiency gain. Without getting too technical, there were a lot of issues with what's called cold bridging within the building. So in this particular instance, and we wouldn't always advise it, cavity wall insulation was really effective, as was better heating systems and roof insulation and alterations to the stairwells. That building is of course quite unique in that it is a 20th century piece of architecture. It's constructed very differently to, say, a 19th century tenement, but we've also produced guidance on tenement shops, things like that as well. So that was in that case, but wouldn't always recommend those exact works.
For our audience, it's interesting because you hear about, and I've probably brought this up before to some, but you hear about moving from in our building, steam heat, and it's not green, but it's worth the pause, and they're looking at that very closely now because it's not what you would think. And companies like Con Ed are talking about, and they've done a good job so far, of the decarbonization of steam. And I'm resisting the whole thought of these ever being electrified. Number one, we have 103 radiators. They're beautiful, they're historic, and they've never been replaced. If you had other systems, every 25 years you got to chuck it in a landfill. So it's beautiful that they've lasted. We have a nice, clean, direct feed from Con Ed. And if anyone's here from the city of New York, yes, I will put up a fight, and I'm formidable, so you're not taking our radiators.
Thank you. There's a question at the back of the room. So as I walk to the back, I'm going to ask you a couple of the online questions. This is from Jay. Do you have an American entity to which one can contribute, since there is no tax deduction for contribution to a foreign entity?
Yeah, so we do not have a specific US entity. However, people can absolutely make those tax deductible donations. We have set up an agreement with an organization called Chapel in York that allows us to do just that. For those of you who are here in person, on the back of the leaflet that is on your seat, I believe, there's a link that you can follow and do just that. So no, we don't have that specific US entity, but yes, the donations that you make can be tax deductible.
Hi, thank you.
Hi.
I'm so glad you mentioned John Muir. John Muir, a tremendous individual, and I'm glad that he was Scottish. And we know that the Scots invented that great game of golf. And then you also mentioned something about preserving cemeteries. I consider myself to be a conservationist as well. So my question is there any discussion by the Edinburgh World Heritage about minimizing golf courses, even though they're beautiful, but I don't think it's good for land use and cemeteries. And you know, with the overpopulation, it's so upon us. So I'm very curious about Edinburgh. Have they discussed that?
Really good question. So for golf courses in particular, there are no golf courses within the Old and New Towns of Edinburgh World Heritage Site. So that's not a discussion that we get often involved with. However, I would say, not my area of expertise, but generally within Scotland, there are questions being had around that in light of sustainability concerns. So there are a great number of golf courses in wider Edinburgh, and I'm sure that that is being looked at. With regards to graveyards, there are 5 major historic graveyards within the World Heritage Site, and they are incredibly important historical artefacts in their own right. So we have done various conservation works to help look after them. There are very limited new burials within those. So again, you're kind of looking at graveyards out with the World Heritage Site. And I have to, when I don't know something, I will hold my hands up. I don't claim to have knowledge of, you know, the wider sort of cremation versus burial system and how that works in the rest of the country. But we preserve our small and extremely special graveyards in the World Heritage Site very carefully. Thank you.
Can you talk about, this is from online, the stone? What kind of stone is used, and is it particularly weak that it's deteriorating, or is it just dealing with so much?
Great question. So it is sandstone that is primarily used in Edinburgh, and they were often quarried locally, and it is a very sort of golden sandstone. It's quite a high quality sandstone. If you go further north to places near Aberdeen, like Montrose and Arbroath, you will find a much more red coloured sandstone that has a great deal more iron in it, and that makes it weaker. So by Scottish standards, the sandstone in Edinburgh is really quite robust, very much like the wonderful radiators in this building. They were built to last. So the increased deterioration that we are seeing is really due to those more severe wind and rainfall events that are happening as a result of climate change. Great question again.
I'm curious about, you were talking about modernization and bringing new buildings into the space, but I'm also curious about sort of reuse of older structures. And I guess to some degree, if it's privately owned, then that entity just gets to control sort of what happens there. And you know, we don't necessarily get to decide, does an Apple store or a Starbucks get to be in one of these buildings? But I'm curious about, is any of your work also dedicated to those kinds of uses of historic spaces, like that you're preserving the older structure, or you're helping them renovate the older structure, even if, you know, maybe personally you think, oh, should this building be used for this purpose, or should this you know, maybe we need to change this building around to have an accessibility ramp that wasn't there before, or a lift or something.
So in terms of uses, we do engage on that issue, not for every single application that comes through the city, but certainly for the key ones. So in Scotland, we have something called a local development plan, which basically identifies for each city what kind of uses would be beneficial where. So we influence that on a considerable basis. And that image that I showed you of the Royal High School, where we stopped the hotel development, one of the major grounds for that was this cannot be a private use, it has to be a cultural use that is accessible without anyone having to pay money. So this is mainly done through the planning system, and is absolutely something that we get involved with for, I think, really positive effect.
Right, we're going to round up shortly, and I know there's probably many more questions, but I know that our in-person audience will be able to ask Christina. So I'm just going to finish, if you don't mind, with a couple of quick fire questions from the online audience. When was Edinburgh founded?
It varies, but I would say 1126 with King David I.
What made it the capital?
Well, that was by Royal Borough Charter, so that was formed as part of that.
What is the most representative food of Edinburgh?
Deep fried haggis. And it's good. It's really good.
What is the best season to visit? And these questions were all from Elaine, online.
Ooh, I would say springtime. It's nice and quiet, the flowers are out, and it's nice and fresh and sunny.
Right. Okay, and I am going to finish now. We did have a question about funding. Is it a mixture of private and public funding?
Yep, exactly. Right. Yep, we get a significant amount of our funding from the national body for heritage, Historic Environment Scotland, but that is by no means all of it, and we're only able to do what we do through our corporate and individual supporters.
Right. I'm going to fire you one more question, if I may, just because this is interesting. Is there a significant difference between Georgian architecture found in Edinburgh versus Georgian architectural style elsewhere?
There are a great number of similarities. You know, if you go to places like Bath, you will see a lot of similarities with the Georgian architecture there. However, every city has its own style, and Edinburgh was very good at marketing itself, architecturally and otherwise, very distinctly.
Thank you for so beautifully answering the quick fire round. Thank you very much.
That was stressful. Thank you.
I want to express our appreciation, but before we do so, perhaps Camilla, you want to say a few words?
Well, I just wanted to thank everybody for being here, and Christina, what an amazing talk. And also, I just wanted to say again a thank you to all of you at the General Mechanics. It's been wonderful to have this evening with you. Thank you, Victoria. Thank you, Karen. And please, in a moment as we finish up here, join us for a reception and a chance to ask more questions with Christina.
Thank you. And Christina, thank you. That was wonderful, and I can't wait to visit. A beautiful presentation. Thank you. And Camilla, we're really enjoying our time with the American Scottish Foundation, but Camilla, it's not all about how wonderful you are, because I'm always mindful that in 1903, Andrew Carnegie, as you pronounce it, gave the General Society of Mechanics and Tradesmen $250,000 to build this library and put 2 floors on the building. And there's a bust of him in our office, and I personally thank him every day. I never don't think about him. So of course, when Camilla comes calling, I have to be loyal to Brother Carnegie, who, when he signed the membership register in 1903, became a brother of the General Society. You have to put your name in your trade. We still do it to this day. He signed his name, Andrew Carnegie, but he put his trade cotton spinner because that was his first job. And of course, he admired the laborer. And when we were restoring the skylight, I have to say, despite architects, engineers, I was the first one to notice they had exposed a structural beam. And I said, wow, look at that. It says Carnegie, USA. So it was so lovely to see his steel in the back there. So with this in mind, and because you made a special trip, thank you. And you also came bearing gifts with my name on it, because I didn't know there's a Victoria Street. So now I really have to visit. And I just have a couple of gifts I want to give you. Karen, do you mind holding it? So, number one, we only have a couple left, so I'm sorry. We love all of our lecturers equally, but for some reason I said I have to give you this. So
Thank you so much.
yes, well, you could open it. It's
Yeah.
fast because it's pretty and you have to.
I know, I don't want to break that seal.
It's okay.
Oh, wow.
We're giving Christina, it's a scarf of the General Society of Mechanics and Tradesmen, from our 225th anniversary, and that was hand-drawn by Marisol de Luna, so you can remember us.
Thank you so much.
And then, well, one more gift and then we're done.
Well, practically.
Oh, well,
Should open this one a little faster.
so. And, because she didn't get to.
Oh, yes, she didn't.
Christina didn't get to spend much time in the Locke Museum, and for those of you who are not aware, because Karen's always pushing other books, but this book tells about each lock and the cases up there. They methodically, that collection was given to us by John Mossman. He was a bank vault manufacturer and member of the General Society. He amassed that collection in 20 years, and then they, in a very organized way, wrote a book called The Lure of the Lock, which we have a lot of, we've had our fair amount of movie and television, so I've met a lot of directors, and not to drop names, but I do this when I meet them, and I did do it to Steven Spielberg, because I think it's possible. I said, and now I'd like to give you a copy of The Lure of the Lock, soon to be a major motion picture. Because I swear, that's a great title, right? Anyway, to our audience, thank you for coming. To our online audience and in-person audience, and to Christina and Camilla, thank you.
Thanks. I just want to say a final few words. Christina, as I said, you are the most terrific ambassador for Edinburgh, and I hope many people here will be inspired by Christina's words tonight to support Edinburgh World Heritage. So thank you so much. We have a final little gift for you, the poster. Yeah. And I also want to take the opportunity to mention that we have a lecture next week, Fifth Avenue Architecture and Society, A History of America's Street of Dreams, and continuing the Scottish connection. The Scots Who Built New York and Boroughs, with historian and architect John Kinnear, Tuesday, October 22nd. I hope you'll come back for that. To our online audience, thank you so much for attending. For our in-person audience, thanks to the American Scottish Foundation, you have a number of edible treats. So thank you, Camilla, for that. Thank you all for coming this evening. Thank you so much.